Welcome to Fierce Female Filmmakers, a production of Artemisia's Daughters, a non-profit organisation that aims to inspire, educate, empower and employ women of all ages and backgrounds in the film and TV industries. Welcome to Fierce Female Filmmakers. My guest today is Polina Kalentsist, who is very special to me because she was the production designer on my feature film, Widow's Walk. She works in art department. She's a production designer. She's worked on Mike Leigh's Peterloo, the series The Durrells, Britannia, The Enfield Haunting. The list goes on. You need to check her out on IMDb. But today she's going to talk to us a little bit about her job and what it entails. Polina, welcome.
Hello. Hi, Alexandra. It's so good to see you.
Yes. When you spend that intense period of time together making a film, and then you don't see anybody, you don't see that person for ages, so it's so nice to see you.
And it's such a short period of time, but it's such intense because you spend pretty much 24 hours together. We stayed in the same house.
Yes.
It was a wonderful experience. But
So tell me a little bit about your job. I didn't actually, in your introduction, talk about your amazing work as an artist. Is that how you started in fine art?
Well, that's something that I'm trying to pursue both careers at the same time and feeding one into another. It all started back in Estonia. That's where I'm originally from. And when I was at school, after school, I would go to an art school. It was the Tallinn School of Art, and students ages, I think it was 14 to 18. After your normal school, you'd finish your normal school at 3, and you'd go to the art school if you choose to. Lessons were 3 or 4 times a week, and about 3 hours after school, and we did really traditional painting, light drawing, composition lessons, and that was about 3 years. So after I graduated there, I knew that I wanted to do something with arts, and then an absolutely amazing opportunity came up when I got involved with the British Council in Estonia, and I won a scholarship to go to a boarding school in England.
Wow. To do art or an art boarding school or school?
So I would do AS and an A level. By that point, obviously, I've been learning English since I was 7, but I wouldn't say I was particularly fluent. I could very well tell you how to get from Houses of Parliament to London Bridge or something, or I knew...
like me with my French.
So it was very, very, well, I wouldn't say it was basic, but I definitely wasn't able to communicate, and, it was tough. And in the art school, so Estonian system is very different. In Estonia, you study, 12, 13 subjects all the way till you're 18, and then you graduate, and then you specialise once you go to uni. The biggest shock for me going from the Estonian system to the UK system, I realised, wow, I only have to pick 4 subjects. That's about it. I was like, great. And I've always been good at art at school, and, that was my thing, but I never quite realised I can genuinely do that, for most of the year. So, and then that's where I've started doing more art, started to work on a bigger scale, I also picked film studies at the time, and because I've had interest in film, and I was always curious how it all works, how it's produced, but I had absolutely no idea. I've never met anyone who was in film. I've never watched a documentary about how it's made. It was just, I was fascinated by the world, by the colours, by history, by all of them. And once I started doing film studies, it was theoretical. It wasn't practical film studies. But we were watching films, we're analysing them, thinking about the set design, about all the analysis of a film and so on. And then I started thinking maybe I can combine the two. And once I finished, I was too scared. I decided that I do want to work in film, but I was too scared to give up art because I still feel like part of me wants. I'm not ready to give up art. It's something that I do, and it's something I want to do, and I feel that one can fuel the other. And I like alternative cinema, I like cult and art house cinema, and that's something that hopefully one day I get involved with in one way or the other. And so,
just to sort of interrupt a little bit, I understand completely what you're talking about, because there was a period of time when I lived in Los Angeles where I studied interior design, and one of the classes was art history, all the way through from, hand painting or in cave walls to present day. And I absolutely loved it. And it was a compulsory part of learning about design. And now that I'm a filmmaker, and of course you're in such an intensely visual medium, which you can also add sound and color and movement and music to, I still go back to that training. So I think what you're talking about, and a lot of women that I'm talking about on this podcast, are these crossover skills that you're coming up with it on your own. Like, well, I want to be an artist, and how can I apply that to another passion of mine, filmmaking? And the answer is you can.
Absolutely. And the other side of it was, maybe I didn't necessarily want to be a fine artist. I like working with people. I like challenges. I like being creative and arty, but also having, produced something. So for me, I think film was, or art department as such, was still being able to do something really arty and something, satisfying and
collaborative, because painting alone in a studio can be pretty lonely. And then you have to sell your art if you're going to live by it. And I think having someone else hire you along those lines, yes, that's I understand that.
And I think the other thing with art, I think for me, it's almost you would have to choose what you do and stick to it to a certain extent. You've got your style, you've got your medium. Whereas with film, I think, because I've been really, really fortunate that I've been able to work on different period productions. So I've worked from early medieval on Britannia. I've done a lot of the 20th century. I've done 50s, 60s, 40s. I've done Georgian productions, Victorian. So it's just so many worlds that you're able to explore and create.
Yes. Yeah, you absolutely cannot specialize just in one thing, but you have to be really good for that moment on that particular style, or in interpreting the style of that period. I know on Widow's Walk, the main character was an artist, and you did some of the most beautiful pencil drawings of the two little boys. Almost photographic renderings of them. They're just so special to me. And then that painting you did of the beach, which we put in the interior of the living room. I mean, it's such a. I think that's quite rare to have somebody. We might have had to hire that job out, but you come along with those skills, so you must be very valuable to the art department and to the production designer.
I think sometimes the set decorators or designers have to stop me, because obviously the job itself it's very full on, and sometimes unfortunately there are things that I would love to do and I'm able to do, but the job description and the time given unfortunately doesn't allow for it. But on the last couple of jobs, I've been really lucky again. So I've done I'm doing a BBC TV show. It's called Life After Life, and it's based on a book by Katie Atkinson. And I managed to do about 4 or 5 paintings for it in my free time. So I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better
in your free time. So you bring it along on Monday, and you're like, "Oh, I did this painting. Do you want to put it somewhere?"
Yeah, or no, have a conversation on Friday. Like, we could do with a couple of paintings, couldn't we?
You're very naughty. Of course, you're going to get hired over and over again, but you do have to sleep sometimes as well.
That is true, yeah. As a thing, even though obviously COVID's affected so many people, with film in the UK, I feel like we've been quite fortunate with productions having resumed sort of July, August time. And since my personal experience now, I've been really busy, but I know not everyone's been so fortunate.
Yes, indeed. Now, listen, this is a question I have for you because I constantly have to check on it myself. Can you tell me the difference between the production designer, the art director, and props? Because I know you all work very closely. Sometimes you're doing all those jobs. Sometimes you're on a vast production and it's broken down into departments. I mean, you even have greensmen if you need trees and plants and things, obviously. But we didn't have greensmen because there were very few trees, thank goodness. But can you just break down, and also if you're someone who would like to do that, where do you start? Do you start in props? Do you start, doing paintings? Just give me a little idea, a little overview of your particular department and how vast or how small it can be.
It can range vastly, as you said. It could literally be a one-person department if it's a small short film, for example, or on a multi-million production. It's huge. It can be absolutely huge, but the structure is always the same. So you've got production designer as the head of the department. It's the mastermind, it's the brain of the art department, it's someone's vision. So everyone else works to fulfill the vision of the production designer, but also putting their own input as well. So all the production designers I worked with, they've been fantastic people to work for, and they always listen to what you've got to bring to the table. I think that's what a good production designer does, is getting everyone to work their best and bring their best skills to the table. So if we've got production designer at the top, it then splits into two branches, into set decoration and art direction. So art department. Art department would be responsible for getting the set built. So as such, I would say they're almost like the architects of the art department. They create a space. They create a space of the right size, volume, period, features. When the exterior matches the interior, they do all the technical drawings, models, adapting the locations for them to be, suitable to the story and so on. With the set decoration, I'm currently working in set decoration. I think that's kind of, I found my niche and something that I want to be doing. With the set decoration, it's like the interior design of the film. So in set dec, we provide the wallpapers, flooring, every single item that you see indoors. So say table, chairs, or an actor picks up a glass. It's an action prop. So there is slight nuance here, for example. So there's a difference between the American and the British system, where the action props go into slightly different. But let's go with the kind of straightforward, the way I've experienced it mainly. So in set decoration, there is a set decorator, and I'm assistant set decorator, and there can be one or two assistant set decorators or none. A buyer would be a person who looks after the budget of the art department, and the production would be split in as per set, and every set would be allocated a certain amount of money. So the buyer would be responsible for all the hire contracts for anything that we hire from the prop houses. They would also keep the balance of everything that's been purchased. They would purchase themselves, and they would source props sometimes as well. And there's also a petty cash buyer in a set dec department who would be running out and buying any sort of anything the department might need. It can be props, sometimes it can be action props, sometimes it could be...
Is it food? Do you do the
food? As well, food, depending on the size. So if the actor is not actually eating food, then petty cash buyer is most likely to. Let's say we did a market scene yesterday. So our petty cash buyer had a massive sort of a lorry full of fruit and veg, which we will dispose of, as usually goes to the farm. So we're trying to be as green as we possibly can. But yes, so if the food is not eaten, then petty cash buyers often would buy the food. They would buy the consumables. They would buy sometimes even light bulbs or curtain pulls, basically anything that might need it. On a slightly larger budget productions, we might have an action prop buyer, and an action prop buyer would work quite closely with the director, and they would, think about what would that character have, what sort of wallet would they have. So it is a really interesting position, and it's working closely with the actors, working closely with the designer and the director, and making sure all the hand props are correct, because that's actually something that you see so closely on screen, that it has to be absolutely right for the period, for the style, and so on. Then going back to the art department side of things, you've got the art, sometimes you've got supervising art director, then you've got art directors underneath the supervising art directors. The art directors would often have their own sets. They would work closely with construction, which is a completely separate department, who is then building sets, flattage, and construction incorporates carpenters and painters, and that's named as construction. So they would get the sets built, which is really fascinating being on set and just seeing all those wonderful spaces, but sometimes completely one-sided. So you go outside and it's all just A-frames and supported. Looks absolutely nothing like real life. And then, as you mentioned, food. If food is eaten by the actor, we tend to get a home economist in. So that's someone who we usually outsource. We wouldn't have a home economist within the art department. It would be someone, we've got a few people who we work closely with, and they're absolutely fantastic.
You're making me think of like a huge banquet scene
with
20 actors sitting around a long table, and the servants bringing in plates and having to repeat that and go back behind the outside and replate and bring them all in again, and just calculating or not really knowing how many times you might have to do that. And then you go to an actor and it comes to their close up, and where were they in the meal? Actually, when I think about it, a lot of those scenes, you don't really see people eating that much. I think even the actors don't like to go down the rabbit hole of how much was I eating at this point in time.
But this is exactly where the standby team comes in. So you've got the standby art director who is present on set the whole time. So we are usually working, as art department and set decoration, we are preparing the sets before the film crew gets there. So we only have very short crossover with the crew. So we're there in the morning to show them into the set. We show them everything we've prepared, everything that's there, everything they can play with, and we hand it over to the standby art director. And standby art director has got a team of props. They've got 2 standby props, and they're basically responsible for making sure, as you said, the food is exactly, the continuity is right. They move the items so that the shot is really beautifully. What's the word?
You're dressing the shot. You're dressing the frame.
Yeah, exactly. They're dressing the frame, and they're working closely with the DOP. DOP will have their own vision, the light, and everything. But sometimes be like, you see that little plant behind me? I should move it a little bit to the left. That will frame the shot.
So you're
really
watching the
nicely.
monitor. Yes, you can make this beautiful room, but if it's not in the shot, it's not in the shot.
Exactly.
So you can go and, you have your appropriate time where you can go and nudge everything.
Yeah.
And I spoke to a production designer once. He said, I hate actors. They all stand in the way of my beautiful sets. They're just blocking everything. But I know just, and I think I'm alone in this because it really affects my experience of watching a film. I'm constantly looking at, that lamp on that table over her shoulder. That's really nice. And, what was the colors and this and that? And then I'll miss a whole plot point. I'm the director, I'm the writer, watching other people's work, and I'm missing, and I'll look at my boyfriend. I'm like, where's she going now? He said, she just said where she was going. Oh, I was looking at the set. I think maybe in another life that would have been just as important to me as to do your job, because it is fascinating. You're telling just as much story with your interiors and with props as anything.
But then there's the next level of it. Sometimes now I recognise props. I'll be watching telly, I'll be like, I know this lamp.
You've hired it from that prop house and they've reused it.
And I'd be like, finally a sofa.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's done the rounds.
Yeah, and my friends don't like watching films with me at all because I constantly pay attention to be like, that's location. Now we're on set.
Yeah, that's that studio. That's not a real place.
Exactly.
Yes. Fascinating. So that was interesting. You said your favorite part is to do the interiors, is to do the stuff that's probably much more personal and hands-on. Like I'm thinking of a big exterior shot or a big set that's built. It might take them months to build it, but it's literally not even a 10-second moment of the film. And you at least get to fold in all of these moments and these props that, are telling the story. Again, I'm thinking of Widow's Walk when she opens the suitcase and basically a huge chunk of the plot is being told with no words. There are letters in there that you had to write in World War II style handwriting. There were old photographs. There were clothing items. There were all sorts of things that just gently started to unfold the denouement of the story. And I know I had written them in there. I was like, okay, we need silk stockings, we need some magazines from the period, we need some... But that's so easy for me to write in a paragraph, but you had to go out and find everything.
That's the fun part of the job. I think it's the research and finding thing is that's what I love most about it, because we go to. And
what did you lot do before eBay? I mean,
well, antique markets are amazing. So we're very lucky in the UK that we've got Kempton, we've got Ardingly, we've got Newark markets, and traders from, well, less so from the EU, but all the local traders. It's huge airfields where antique dealers come and sell their stuff. So,
and where do you put it when you get it? See, these are the questions that I have. Don't you just have like 2 storage spaces full of like, oh, I don't need that on this show, but I might need it, and it's just so unique. I just have to have it in my collection.
Well, we're all hoarders a little bit. I was resisting for a long time. I was doing extremely well, and because I'm still renting, so I don't have much space to store things. But
I'm even looking at your living room, and it looks very sparse compared to what I would imagine. You don't have enough shelf space, and you clearly don't have enough storage there.
Exactly.
So where are you hiding it,
well,
Polina?
In this flat, I've got a basement, so my hoarding has begun.
Yes, okay. And that had to be part of your remit. Your I need a basement to put all my stuff.
Yeah. So, a colleague I work with, he's got 2 garages. I've only got 1 basement so far, but it's a slippery slope.
But the thing is, too, I have friends who have antique shops, and they'll acquire things and they'll have them in their house for a while. They'll, put them on active storage, like have them in the house. And she's like, but it won't stay. I'll put it back in the shop eventually because everything has a price on it. And you could even do that. You could even argue, look, these are my dining room chairs, which I got for a song at that market, 18 months ago. But they'd go great in this scene.
Exactly.
And you're just dining room chairless for the shoot.
Well, I'm trying not to. I think there's always an expectation. If you bring something to set, the chances are very, very high you're not going to get back. So I think early on I've learned things that I'm precious about, I'm not bringing them on set, because there are so many people involved in handling it, and it's absolutely not anyone's fault. You hand something over to the prop team, which will be responsible to get that over to set. On set it will be handled by the actors. The standbys obviously look after it, but we've got I don't know how many thousand props, and it just becomes one-off. So you can't, as soon as you bring something to set, you have to prepare yourself that you might not ever be getting it back.
Did that happen to a couple of lovely things, and that was your lesson learned?
That taught me the lesson that I can't even remember what it was, but I think I've learned the lesson not to do that.
Yes. Yes. So of all the periods in time that you have delved into, what do you think is your favourite? Or what was the most challenging? I mean, medieval Britain, that must have been quite challenging. What kind of artefacts do we have? Did you sort of troll the halls of the British Museum?
We did. We went to British Museum. We've met lots of wonderful, wonderful artisan makers. So there are still people out there who make beehives the way they were made in medieval England. There is reenactment groups who still, fight the same way, who make the boats. We managed to find boats that people who still stretch animals' skins on the wooden carcasses, and they float.
Where are these people? Are they in Wales or somewhere?
Wales, everywhere. It's the more you start looking into it. There is reenactment fairs. There are places where you can go and you can buy quilts. You can buy tools to sharpen the quilts. You can go. It's fantastic. As soon as you start searching, and people are so willing to pass on the knowledge as well. They want you to have a conversation. They want things to be correct on screen. And what else? And there are museums, and museums are very, very happy to share the knowledge. They've got fantastic books. They've got materials and research.
So you're talking about museums. You would source it from these people who are reenactments or not reenactors, and they're passionate about making it and crafting something exactly the way it was made then. So that feels like even that they've learned that craft. Will they give those pieces over to you, even though they're not the genuine article, the museum piece? Sometimes do they sort of like, they hand over a sword or an item that just feels way too precious? Or can you reproduce it in a cheaper way that it doesn't matter if something happens to it?
Oh, no, absolutely. So things like really expensive artifacts, we would never, be able to afford the insurance on it, or would we want to handle something so precious? I think with the artisans, it's often, especially with medieval things, it's things that people would have made with their hands, which often involves wood, wool, fabric, clay. So things like that can be easily reproduced in a style of.
So you would give that to your prop maker, and they'd be like, "Oh, right, no flies on this. I can see how it's made. I'm gonna maybe not as meticulously reproduce it, but certainly reproduce it well enough for a film."
Well, that, and also there are things like the very traditional potteries that I've got a fantastic contact. Trinity Pottery are the most amazing, and everyone should definitely check out what they do. But they reproduce traditional Saxon designs, medieval crockery, jugs. So, and they're same for glass. So there are certain items that you can purchase that recreate what the artifacts of that time would have looked. Things like swords or weapons, that would usually go to a prop house and hire it, or would go to a prop maker, a specialist prop maker, and would usually everything is done quite properly. So would have a drawing made. That drawing would have been approved by the production designer, by the director. It would have been completely signed off on, would choose the material, whether it needs to be soft. Let's say if actors are fighting and there is a danger of hurting someone, it has to be done in a certain material. Or if it's just maybe someone is lifting and it has to look heavy, then we'd do it of a slightly heavier material. So
made out of polystyrene.
Exactly. Or if it's too soft and someone is waving it, you could see that the sword is swaying. And I see that on the screen sometimes. I'm like, oh, that's a soft sword. Definitely not a real one.
Oh, you see, you're spoilt forever now, knowing all the backstage, the behind-the-scenes tricks. So have you ever done a fantasy world? Have you ever done something that's futuristic or dystopian where you've had to design something or create something from scratch?
That is something on my to-do list. I would absolutely love to do a fairy tale. I would love to do a fairy tale. I think in a way Britannia was a little bit like it, because the further back you go, the less accurate you can be. There is a lot less information. You can be more creative. You've got more creative license, effectively. If you were to do, let's say, 2000s, everyone still remembers it, and everyone would call in and say, "Oh, look, that mobile phone didn't come out till 2005. Why have you got it in?"
Well, the mobile phones are the giveaways now, aren't they? I think it's why there's so many shows now being set in the 70s and 80s, because you can't solve a crime or a situation just by calling on your phone or looking where you are on your GPS. You have to do this silly thing where there's no signal, and you just see the audience going, "All right, stuck somewhere with no signal. That'll keep the story going." Yeah, you've got to get cell phones right. You've got to get computers. You know, the Apple computers have gone through so many designs.
Computers are really difficult. And with computers, you've got computer screens, and that's the whole next level of pain. No, that's really difficult because there's so many elements involved with the lighting, the strobing, getting the graphic correct. So personally, that I find really challenging. I think anything that involves computers or technology where you have to be very specific, and you know that there are people who are very knowledgeable about it out there, and
there'll be letters to the BBC.
Let's
yes.
say a radio.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it's interesting, when you do a certain period, your brain starts working in a different way. So at the start of the job, you start questioning yourself. It's like, is this right? Is this wrong? You do research. You constantly check. Is this fork? Is it right? Is this spoon correct? And then about 2 or 3 months in, your brain just clicks and you look at something and you're like, oh, I think because you see so many references along the way, you start being able to judge whether would this pass would this not look wrong? So for sort of background things, and then for the really important foreground things, you do really meticulous research. You would basically, we all want to make it as correct as possible with the given resources and given time.
I know I worked on Titanic, and I had a very small part, which was marvellous because there was just no pressure except to show up in, my beautiful ball gown and stand around on that amazing set, right? But I was constantly fascinated by everything you're talking about. You really felt like you were standing in the living, breathing ship, because the attention to detail was breathtaking, and the rugs had been woven by the same carpet company that had done the rugs on the Titanic, because they were still, and they had the patterns, they had them in their archives. So like,
that makes me like fluster and shiver.
and I was sat at the captain's table at one point, and there was a menu holder, which was silver, like a little silver box with an upright star on it for White Star Line, and like a clip. And the menu was a piece of paper, obviously printed with the exact menu of that date of that dinner on the Titanic, sat in the top of, at each fork and knife had a White Star Line stamp on it. You've never ever in any shot in that enormous film saw the level of detail down to the White Star Line stamps on the knives and forks and all the crockery, all the plates. They were done to that level of detail, to the point where, as an actor, I called it sort of no acting required. You walked onto that set, you're dressed in the costume, which you've seen yourself in that outfit, and then everything is as if it was 1912 on the Titanic, and you just go along with all of that grandeur and all of that meticulous attention to detail. It's wonderful. It was that's why I love doing period dramas, because you just really get to appreciate. It makes your job, the actor's job, so much easier to have everything just roll back in time, and there you are.
It's amazing for me to hear as well, that the fact that creating that world can really impact the acting as well, and make you feel like that space.
Oh, without a doubt. And then we shot that scene, the dining room scene, coming down the grand staircase and walking into the dining room. And I was there for all of that. And then we had a 2-week break, and we came back, and in that 2 weeks, they had flooded that dining room. So that was a 3-story set in a huge tank that they flooded with water, and it was on hydraulics so they could tip it. So as you see Kate and Leo going through, the water's obviously at level, but the set was tipped. And everything soaked to oblivion. And I remember coming back after our 2-week break, and those wicker chairs from the morning room or the breakfast room that had again been made specifically for that set, for that scene, were completely soaked and water damaged and just sort of stacked on the side, never to be used again, because they had been ruined. They had been soaked in water for 2 weeks. It was over.
I've only done one underwater shoot, but it's quite interesting that you really do have to think about everything has to be in twos. So it affects your artistic choices as well. For that particular scene, we could only choose things that we could find 2 off. So one had to be dry and one had to be wet. So it was quite interesting that kind of the way you choose certain things was also affected about what we were going to do with them.
Yes. Yeah. Well, this was costume, but when we put Noah and all our actors in Widow's Walk in the tank, we were in the tank for 4 days for, again, like a 16-second sequence. And Noah had those little blue stripy pajamas on. And by about Thursday, they were completely washed out because the chlorine in the tank had made them dark. But we went back and we just made them look darker in the grade. So it wasn't like it was the end of the world. But again, I think we must have had a couple of outfits of pajamas, but they didn't fare well in the chlorine that was supposed to be the North Sea.
And it's one of those...
It's just, it would just make my head ache just having that constant backup, or just knowing, going to the actor sort of secretly, look, I've only got one more of these, so you better get it right, because if you break this one...
No,
right?
We've got a very, very good standby team who'd usually give us heads up a few days before. They'd be, oh, this scene is coming up. We would probably need 5 or 6 repeats of this. So, and it's quite good with someone who's always on set and who's very experienced with, they've done people breaking things, they've done people eating, so they know roughly how many things they will need in order to get through the scene. So it's quite good when sometimes we're told, oh, that we'll need 6 breakaway bottles, and then we provide them with the 6 breakaway bottles. But it's very important.
And maybe one for luck.
And one for luck.
Still one
exactly, yeah. Always extra, as many options as we can provide, because they are at the front line. So I think standby job is extremely difficult, because you're on set, director might be asking for something, they might have an idea, and it might be like exactly what's needed. And it's standby's responsibility to then think on their feet, think, what can we do? What can we offer up? What could we've got that could work for the director and for the actors? And
I still remember Kat, your
was
standby.
great.
I was like, you saved the movie today. You saved the movie, because I'm watching. There was steam on the glass, and she's there with the
she knows
the steam
tricks,
coming out of the iron, and that it's just great. And every time I see those when I watch the film, I know how it was put together, and I watched it all not quite happen from scratch. But have you had? All right, do you have any war stories? Any situations where it was art department or something that, I'm not saying that you messed up, but or you had to scramble at the last minute to save the day? Do you remember anything like that?
We had a situation where there was this painting in a film that was scripted, and it was painted by sort of a lady who's got, I think it was dementia. But so she's painting this really unusual painting, and it's been going back and forth. I think we've done about, 30 different versions, and it just wasn't quite getting right there. So there was 4 of us involved. So the whole art department by this point was basically trying...
Because the image wasn't right, or it was not at the right stage of the painting?
It wasn't the right stage, it wasn't the right size, it wasn't the right look. We just couldn't quite pin it down and get it right. So... eventually, the whole department is ready by this point, painting it. There's one which gets sent to the standby. We're like, okay, so you're done. Then we get a phone call from the standbys. Director doesn't like the painting. So at that point, they're like, Polina, get in the car, drive. So I drive to the location. I get to set. I think it was about
with your paintbrushes and your palette,
my palette and my painting kit. And it's, I think, 10 minutes before they're on camera. And what we did, we had a printout of it was based on a real painting, which was then painted in quite an unusual way. So then we have the original painting, and I'm just painting over this printout in my t-shirt in the back garden, and then I finish it. The moment I put the last brush mark down, standby runs in, grabs the painting, goes in, and they film on it, and they liked it. So
brilliant.
But that was high intensity, high stress. But I think I'm very, very fortunate that I work. So I've been really lucky to have worked with such amazing art departments that all of the kind of panics or wars, they're either anticipated, or if they do happen, we kind of deal with it as a department. And I do feel that I've been very, very fortunate to have sort of like my film family where we all look out for each other, and
But there's always a moment like that, an unanticipated moment. Yeah. And that's the other thing I sort of try to instill on people who want to come into this industry, where you might start at any level as a runner, a PA, and if you can show initiative like that, like get in the car, do this, go to the, get some change at the car park, go, even at that base level, and then at your level, anything in between where you just think on your feet or you can make it happen, it's always appreciated. You might not always get the credit for it, or even, but you will advance so quickly. You will get hired again and again and again when you show those moments where you save the day, or you'll get recommended to somebody else because you did such and such in a situation, or you can be relied upon. And this industry is not for people who are just, it's not for dilettantes. It's not for people who are just hanging around or want to be around movie stars or like cameras and lights and you have to have these other special qualities to your personality that allow you to do exactly what you're talking. It's like it's grace under fire. That you knew you had a job to do. Probably if you'd had a week to do that painting, it would still not have come. But you didn't. You had 10 minutes, and you came up with it. And that's I love those stories. Or when something came and it was completely wrong, and somebody said, "What about this?" which is a completely different idea. But I have another friend who says the best idea wins. Best idea wins, and if it costs us less money, even better.
Yeah, no. And it happens all the time. That's the thing. Like, we plan as much as we possibly can. We plan for the furniture to be there, for the wallpaper to be right, but things happen. Not enough wallpaper got printed, not enough wallpaper got ordered. Ooh, have to print it. Or you always, and it's a very high stress job. So every day you're just putting out fires. There's something going wrong. You're trying to deal with one thing, and then something else happens. And if you've got a supportive art department, then there's no blame, and everyone's trying to help each other, and we're all in it together.
That's it. There's no blame. It's like an accident happens, or a happy accident happens, and everybody gets to enjoy the outcome. When you said you work very hard, it's very stressful. Are you finding yourself? You said you've been busy even since last year, even with COVID. Do you find that it's hard to turn work down? Do you take time out and travel and just decompress, or have you been finding that you're going from job to job to job at the moment?
I'm getting better at this. I think this is definitely a massive thing when you're starting off. The fear of being unemployed is massive. Because when you get into the industry, no one tells you, you get a rough idea how it works. You understand that everyone's self-employed and we all go from one job to another, but it's not as straightforward as, applying for the job. You need to approach people, you get one job which then potentially leads to another job. And once your first job ends, it's really scary. You just don't know when the next job going to come, or how am I going to get the next job? Will anyone ever want to employ me? And then whatever comes, you feel like, oh, I have to take it. This is it. This might be the only opportunity.
Or if I turn that down, that person may not think of me the next time. You want to constantly be in the forefront of somebody's idea to be hiring. Yes, I understand that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I think the longer you work, I've started realizing that gaps between jobs, it's not my unemployment, it's more my holiday.
Yes.
And I need to really treasure and cherish those, gaps between jobs, and trying to recharge and, get ideas and see things and just have a little bit of life, because when you're on the job, it's long hours.
Yes.
It's, we're contracted to do 11-hour days, 5 days a week. So it's a lot more than a normal 40-hour week. And even so,
it's more than that once you get home. Yes, and your brain doesn't switch off just because you're not on set or in the studio. Yes.
So, this summer I've made a decision that because of COVID, I've not been able to go home and see my family. So, and it's quite an unusual decision for me, because usually I'll just be like, yes, the job, okay, I'll go home at some point later. But I feel because things have changed, and because people, I guess, starting to prioritize their families and personal things a bit more, I think with the view of not being able to see your loved ones and not to be able to spend, or before would be able to maybe hop in a plane and go see them for a weekend, or if I've got a long weekend or something, whereas now it's the commitment you have to make. And I feel, obviously waiting for the country to go on the green list, but as soon as I can, that is priority number one. And then there will be jobs coming up, and they're busy at the moment, and I know that colleagues of mine who would want to work with me, they will reach out if they've got opportunities.
No, I think it's very important. As you're kind of talking about mental health, actually, and mental well-being. Is that this is the most stressful job I've ever done as a director, because I thought acting was stressful. It is not. It's really fun by comparison, and I think directing is fun, especially when a scene comes together, and I love post-production and all of those things and those elements. But I think it is exactly what you're talking about. It's like, no, I'm making a conscious decision to just stop and take a breath, because that's as important as go, go, go.
But it's taken me 5 years to be able to do
Yeah.
so. I would say this is the first time where I feel comfortable to do so and don't have that kind of that fear inside of, is this the last job I'm going to do? Would anyone ever want to take me?
Because also you probably feel a little bit more, you're more established, and your network of people who will hire you is much stronger than it is at the beginning. And again, I think that's another thing to impress upon somebody starting out, is that it takes time to build up those relationships. And sometimes you might find yourself doing jobs you don't want to do, but it'll pay off in the long run because,
Absolutely.
you know.
And I think a very important thing to touch upon as well is when starting off is very hard financially as well. This is a very brutal industry in the sense of with self-employment, when you're employed, obviously you're getting paid, but the moment you stop, for example, the moment I finished university, when I did almost a year of interning, but in order to be able to survive in London at the same time, I had a pub job. And I remember it took me a really long time to be able to fully give up my pub job, because it was that kind of normality and steadiness that I knew that I can always go back to. So for the first year, I was trying to balance film work, starting out as an art department assistant, petty cash buyer, doing some runner jobs, whatever I could get. But in the gaps between, I had my pub job, because this was absolutely the only way I could survive in London. So, and gradually that, I started doing less pub work and more film work, and eventually I gave it up altogether, and then kind of slowly carried on. But the first couple of years have been really hard.
Yes.
But
Yes. Yes. Well, what have you got coming out that we should look out for? The stamp or the brushstroke of Polina in an upcoming streamer or something in the cinema that you can talk about. Sometimes you're sworn to secrecy until a little bit more information's out there. But tell us something that we should look out for.
well, something that recently came out was Emma, which I worked with the most fantastic set decorator Stella Fox and Kate Quinn, the designer.
My God, the costumes and those interiors, that must have been incredible.
That was absolutely incredible to work with, and the most insanely creative and talented team, so it was really exciting to be part of. So that's really exciting. That's something that you can see. I was very much involved with the haberdashery in the film, so I was collecting all the little fabric samples and the buttons and the fabrics in the backgrounds. That was extremely fun set.
Oh, I was just looking at the trailer. The trailer itself, you can't take your eyes off her ringlets, and then you look at all the little buttons on those the tops of the costumes and the puffy sleeves and yes, I can't imagine what a joy that must have been to get right.
Absolutely, and Stella and Kate, they're just such a talented team, and anything they do is going to look fantastic.
But how far back would they have started working on that to make such specific choices about because the colours as well, I just noticed the colours seem to be either correct for is it Georgian period or is it Regency? So and I know we think of this is what I remember doing art history and so forth. We think of antiques and so forth being faded and old and a bit brown, but those colors during the Georgian period, they had bright colored wallpapers and bright colored paint on their interiors.
It's interesting that you said that. It's actually a really fine line, because we know that things would have been new at the time, but there is such an expectation of the viewers that unfortunately we have to satisfy. So,
and it looks like you've ramped up the color grade but no, those were the colors.
So I think we usually go for something in between. So we try to go correct and the correct colors for the period, but sometimes we have to mute them a little bit, depending on the film, obviously. But just to kind of make it more believable for the viewer.
That's interesting, yeah, because we've all visited a stately home. And those silks and those colours, they aren't bright and shiny. But you're right. If you had money and you just had the decorators in, you just had the painters in, it would be fresh and new. Fascinating. Yeah. Anything else just to end on?
The other really exciting film that's coming out is the working title was Louis Wain, but I think it's going to be called the Electric Life of Louis Wain, and that was a wonderful project to work with. So I worked with my absolutely dear set decorator Charlotte was, who is, definitely call her my mentor, and an amazing designer, Susie Davis. And it's based on the life of the artist Louis Wain, who lived during the Victorian times. And he's particularly famous for drawing really cute pictures of cats, which you might think that it's a very modern, like, meme phenomena. But no, in the Victorian times, he did most wonderful little postcards of cats ice skating, cats having tea parties, and it's wonderful. It's really wonderful.
Did you have to recreate any of those postcards?
I wasn't involved, no. We had an artist employed for the job who was working on the artworks and getting, so that the designer and the director are happy with the look. I can't say too much about it because it's not officially out yet.
Yes.
But it's going to be absolutely wonderful, beautiful, beautiful film that's definitely to look out for.
Oh, that sounds, I love biopics, and and it sounds like a really interesting.
And he had fantastic lives, because even if you just look online of what he got up to.
Amazing. Polina, thank you so much. I feel like I've had a mini masterclass in how to start your production designer career. And it seems to me that you're just going from strength to strength and working on these really intricate and beautiful. I feel so honoured to have had you do the work on my film, because it does look absolutely gorgeous, and thank you for coming to speak to me today.
No, thank you, Alexandra. It was so great, and I would love. You're an American now, aren't you?
I am.
It would be so lovely to catch up at some point.
Fierce Female Filmmakers is a production of Artemisia's Daughters. For more information, go to artemisiasdaughters.org. Our theme tune is composed by Charlie Mackey.